The Golden State Warriors might just be having the worst offseason in recent NBA history, probably the worst offseason of every team this year. But despite everything that has happened or everything that hasn't happened for Golden State and all the fan backlash, things still aren't over for the Dubs. And at the end of the day, there is still a man on this team named Steph Curry, and if you have Steph Curry on your team, you are still going to be competing. So let's talk about some of the Warriors' moves and where they stand headed into the 2026 season and see if there is a reason for Golden State fans to get excited. Welcome to 30 Teams in 30 Days, let's get into it. Golden State is in a really difficult situation. For years, they've still been trying to compete with guys like Curry and Draymond Green, and for a little bit, Klay Thompson, where they've been trying to compete without giving up their future. But it's this year where the combination of building for your future while trying to compete now is really starting to hurt them, and a lot of that is for two reasons. The first is the Jonathan Kuminga contract situation, something I'll talk about in a moment, but the second reason, and probably one of the more important ones, is the dominance and the building of the Western Conference. The Clippers have gotten better, one of the most underrated teams in the league, and they added John Collins and they got a steal of Bradley Beal. The Rockets added Kevin Durant, and the Nuggets made a ton of smart offseason moves that make them a personal favorite of mine. And of course, we can't forget about the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's just to name a few, but these are teams that got stronger without seriously compromising their future, something the Warriors have been trying to do. These other teams did it better. Despite all of this though, the Golden State Warriors still have one of the best duos in the league, Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler. When these two guys actually managed to play together, they went 22-5. Statistically, they were one of the best duos in the entire NBA, at least from a winning percentage standpoint. This team was possibly just one injury away from a conference finals appearance. They beat the Rockets in 7 games, and they lost to the Timberwolves in just 5, but I think that was a closer 5 games, or at least could have been a closer 5 games than what actually happened. But what about the rest of the team surrounding this dominant duo? They lost Kevon Looney, they didn't have a first-round pick, they only had 1 second-round pick, they didn't make any free agent signings at the time that I make this, and they are getting older while everybody else is getting better. Of course, there have been trade talks mostly surrounding LeBron James and Giannis Antetokounmpo. However, I don't really want to dive into these too much. I've never been much of a trade talk or a trade rumor kind of guy. I think that just is a sign that we're deep into the offseason, but a lot of it just doesn't go anywhere. So I want to talk about some of the realistic, positive moves that the Warriors can make and how this can lead them into a good season next year, because I think this is still totally possible, even as negative as fans seem to have on the Warriors' current outlook. So let's just talk about Jonathan Kuminga and the moves the Warriors can still make surrounding him. Kuminga is coming off of a pretty solid season. He averaged 15, 4, and 2 in limited minutes, played great defense, and is one of the better slashers in the league. He's only going to be 23 by the end of next year, and he's in perfect position to break out. I think he's due for that breakout season, and all he needs is a better team, or at least a better fit and a better role, and we could see a really good version of Jonathan Kuminga next year. And while Kuminga is in that perfect position to break out, I don't think he is the best for this team's long-term plans. Given the fact that the Warriors still have Jimmy Butler and still have Draymond Green, Kuminga is really tough to have from a shooting standpoint. He's a good player, and he's someone that I think has a ton of potential, especially in the right situation. I think we could totally see a good year from him, but I don't think that's going to happen in Golden State, and I just don't think this is the correct fit for him. Golden State has wanted to compete without sacrificing their future, but unlike other teams in the West, they just don't have the cards to make this happen. They have to choose a direction, and when you have Steph Curry, who is still incredible given his age, you have to buy in and try to get that man one last ring. So there are some possible moves that come with Jonathan Kuminga. Specifically, 3 teams have been talked about for him: the Miami Heat, the Sacramento Kings, and the Chicago Bulls. Personally, the Bulls are the move that I might like the most for both teams. For Kuminga to head to Chicago, the Warriors can either get 2 solid options. That would either be Nikola Vucevic, who's definitely one of the older players, or Kobe White. White is a good ball handler and scorer. Post All-Star break, he averaged 25, 4, and 4, and he's just a proven talent. Meanwhile, Chicago's one of the better shooting teams in the entire NBA, so they can already handle a guy like Kuminga and lose that shooting a little bit in a way to build up their defense. On the other hand, if they manage to get Nikola Vucevic, because Kobe White may not be as fair of a trade, but if they manage to get Vucevic, the Bulls would probably like to give him up. He's going to be like 35, 36 next year, doesn't fit their timeline, and he has 1 year left on his contract for about $20 million. Vucevic has a PER of 20, which puts him in probably the top 6, top 7 centers in the entire NBA, so despite his older age, he's still in all-star conversations. He averaged about 20 points, 10 rebounds, he can still score, he can still shoot, and he can still rebound, and those are things the Warriors need. need. Vucevic would also allow for Draymond Green to play the 4 position, somewhere where he excels both offensively and defensively, and given the fact that Draymond's older, you have to put him in the perfect spot to still thrive. As I mentioned in my video about the Chicago Bulls, the Bulls need to pick a direction, and for me, that is heading towards a full-blown rebuild, so getting assets for a guy like Kobe White, who may not be a long-term plan, or getting an asset for Nikola Vucevic, who definitely isn't a long-term plan, would be huge. The Kings are another really interesting move to me because they do have a few stars that could be traded. I know Malik Monk has been talked about, DeMar DeRozan is still there, Zach LaVine is there, Domantas Sabonis is there. I don't know if these are exactly guys that the Kings would want to give away just for Kuminga. Sabonis, I think, would be an amazing fit for the Warriors, but he's too good of a player, but I honestly don't know if he's going to be in Sacramento next year, but that's a different video. DeMar DeRozan definitely doesn't fit the Kings' timeline. He could be looking to go, but DeMar DeRozan and Jimmy Butler is a little redundant to me. Malik Monk could be good, but the Warriors kind of have a decent amount of guards already, and then Zach LaVine is kind of the same situation, but Zach can still give you 24, 25 points per game while giving you really good shooting, so I think he could fit well. For me, with the Kings, this all comes down to how much does Sacramento actually value Kuminga and how much could they see him in their future. If the Kings see Kuminga as a super high potential, high value player, then I could see a trade like LaVine or DeRozan, or possibly even Sabonis if the Warriors throw in the right pieces. However, the more realistic option might be a guy like Malik Monk. I know Keegan Murray has also been talked about as well, but from what I've seen, I don't know if the Kings want to depart from Murray, and honestly, if I'm Golden State, I don't know if I really want him. He had a really solid rookie season, but he's really been trending downward ever since. Maybe a new situation could help him, but maybe Keegan Murray just isn't that guy either. However, Murray does stand 6'8", he does play the power forward position, he doesn't solve the Warriors' size problem, but he could give them another forward, and he did shoot 34% from 3 last year. However, at his best, he shot 41% from 3 on 6 attempts per game. If Murray comes back, he could be a guy that I think is a good swap to go along with Kuminga. Doesn't have as much potential, but he's a guy who is averaging about 12 to 15 points for his career, and if he bounces back from a shooting standpoint, he fills the size, I think he fits better into their system, and he still gives them that scoring. And the last move would be for Kuminga to head to the Miami Heat. Now, this is a move that I don't really see a whole lot in. Obviously, the Heat's best players include guys like Andrew Wiggins, who was traded from the Warriors for Jimmy Butler. There's Tyler Hero, and there's Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, I can't imagine would be good enough for Jonathan Kuminga unless the Heat just totally see the potential, which I don't really buy into, especially with their ages. But Bam and Curry would be one of the best combinations in the entire league, or Tyler Hero and Curry would be one of the best backcourts in the entire league, and we know Jimmy Butler can also play with those guys. And I don't know if Miami would be willing to give up some of their young guys like Jaime Jaquez Jr., which he kind of had a down season, but I personally am a huge fan of him, and I think he could do really well for the Warriors, or a guy like Nikola Jovic, the Nikola Jokic that we have at home. Those are the 3 options, and it's likely that we'll see Kuminga head to one of those places, and I think the Warriors could get a pretty decent return. All of those rosters do have a guy that I really like. It's just a matter of if Golden State can package someone to go along with Kuminga. It also depends on how much potential teams see in him, because I don't know if everyone views him as high as I might, and it just really will depend on the contract situation as well. But let's talk about the rest of the Golden State roster, because there are still some solid pieces. Remember, this is a team that made it to the second round of the playoffs when they weren't expected to get that far, as they finished 7th in the Western Conference, but they still won 48 games. They still have Steve Kerr as a coach. They still have Curry. They still have Butler. Moses Moody, I think, is a really good young backup guard. Same goes for Brandon Podziemski. He is someone that I really think has a ton of potential, and these guys always seem to do well anytime they play against my Phoenix Suns. Trace Jackson Davis, he may not be ready to be a full-time center, but he is an above-average guy. And for Draymond Green, even though his stats have fallen quite a bit from his prime, he still is a good player, and he still is a positive on this team. Per 100 possessions, he actually makes their offense better by about 5.5 points, which is pretty solid, and obviously he has synergy with both Butler and Curry. But let's also talk about some reasonable free agent signings that still exist for the Dubs. The first is Al Horford. Now, reports that I've read as of today say that they expect Horford to sign, but I also saw reports saying Horford expects to sign with the Hawks. Big Al is going to be 39 years old next year, so he's not a guy that I expect would move the needle, but he is a guy that I think can raise the ceiling of just about any team he goes on. He was an above average center last year. He averaged about 9.6 rebounds, a block per game, as well as shooting 36% from 3. He might be a guy that we even see go on a minimum value, so he could really sign anywhere, and I don't think there's a team that he wouldn't help benefit in a starting or bench role. However, I still wouldn't expect a 39-year-old to be the guy who changes up a team. One thing I do think would be interesting is that he does raise the ceiling of the Warriors. He would play perfect alongside a guy like Butler. He would help out Draymond Green. And we've never really seen Steph Curry have another center who can shoot the ball. He's always played with lob threats. He's always played with down low guys like Kevon Looney. We've never seen him with a pick and pop, a pick and fade kind of guy. We've never seen Curry with a real floor spacing center. I think this could lock an entire new dynamic to the Warriors offense, and I think it could be a guy that helps out Jimmy Butler as well. So Al Horford, he's not that big three guy, even though I still expect that Bleacher Report is going to make a graphic out of that because Bleacher Report does big three graphics for everyone. But I do think that Al Horford can be a good signing on a small deal, and I think he could really help out this Warriors team and at least make them relevant in the West. Next one is a fun signing, and that is Seth Curry. Obviously, the Splash siblings as my nickname for them. That would just be really fun to see Steph and Seth playing together. But beyond just the novelty of it, Seth could actually be a really good fit in the Warriors offense. Last year, he led the entire NBA in three-point shooting percentage, shooting just under 46%, which is absolutely insane. He gives them a little bit of shot creation. He fits perfectly into their offense from a shooting standpoint, and Curry has been on record saying that he likes playing with Curry and that he likes the system that the Warriors have. So I think this could just be a perfect fit. Seth Curry is also probably a minimum contract or just above a minimum contract player, so I think he's someone that could fit into the Warriors from a financial standpoint. He's not a bad signing, but like Horford, I don't think he's really going to move the needle, but he can definitely help out that Warriors bench while playing some decent minutes. And then another guy who I think could be very valuable to the Warriors is the exact opposite of shooting, and that is Ben Simmons. Now, we all know Ben Simmons is not the guy that we thought he was going to be, but I personally am still a believer in what he could be. Ben is now a 5-5-5 guy who can give you good defense and still technically be a positive on offense. I think Ben Simmons could perfectly fit into the Warriors situation, as we've already seen Curry and Butler play with a guy like Draymond Green, someone who's a very similar player to Ben Simmons, at least from an X's and O's standpoint. But having two high-level defending playmaking bigs is definitely not a bad thing to have, and I think Steve Kerr could also use Ben Simmons pretty well, as we've seen that with Draymond Green. But with Ben Simmons, there are still issues. He's inconsistent. He can't shoot. He's basically afraid to shoot. He doesn't play a lot of games. Injuries are still a concern. Ben Simmons, being a delusional player, has also stated that he doesn't want a veteran's minimum, even though I personally think he's worth that. Simmons himself doesn't want a veteran's minimum, so it would definitely take some convincing of the Warriors to get, or some financial manipulation in order to make that happen. I'm a believer in Ben Simmons, but he needs to be realistic and he needs to recognize where he is in the league and know that he is well past his days of getting a big contract. And the last player to talk about, someone who definitely seems like he is going back to the Warriors, and that is D'Anthony Melton. Melton only played 8 games for the Warriors last year, but I think this could be another positive move. Melton is just 26 years old, but he's been in the league for 7 years. He's a pretty consistent 10 points per game guy who can shoot the ball. According to his on-off rating last year, he improved the Warriors by almost 11 points per 100 possessions. It's a small sample size, but that is absolutely amazing. These 4 moves are all simple moves, but they really help out the Warriors' depth and just make them an overall better team, probably from where they were last year. And as we know, depth is the name of the game. I say it time and time again, and honestly, it's the one thing I'm right about. Time and time again. The Warriors have some young guys with their potential, and if they choose to trade one of those young guys in Jonathan Kuminga, I personally think that they can get a decent return for him as long as the contracts match up. Even if a trade for Kuminga doesn't go out and get that big 3 type of player, something I kind of hope they don't do because the big 3 just doesn't work in the NBA anymore, even if they get a solid player or a solid 2 players in return, I think that puts the Warriors in a good position. Trades in the past have shown us that if you can trade 1 player for 2 players that give you that production or give you slightly above production, that's usually worth it. But the Warriors are in such a weird position. They've honestly only really gotten worse this offseason at the time that I make this. Unless a guy like Jackson Davis breaks out, which I think he can do this year, but size is still going to be an issue for this Golden State team. In a Western Conference that is pretty big, the Warriors are still playing small ball. Despite all of this, the Golden State Warriors can still compete. When Butler and Curry are healthy, they are one of the deadliest teams in the entire NBA, and in my opinion, they are still a dark horse championship contender. They need the perfect offseason and they need to get the right value for Jonathan Kuminga, but things are not over for Golden State. They still have one more chance to make a last dance. Golden State has pieces, but they have frustrated fans, and one thing is for sure, I would not want to face Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler in the playoffs. This has been 30 for 30. If you liked the video, you know what to do, and I will catch you all next time.